All right, beautiful. Okay, welcome, folks.
Amen.
Amen.
Chaim, Rabbi.
So, we're the day after Gimel Tammuz. A good Tavach. Should come from the holy day, 3rd of Tammuz. That our dear Rebbe, 31 years ago, physically left this world, but is more relevant than ever before. How do we see relevance? When it touches our lives. How do we see relevance? Is that when we study Torah, we see the relevance in the Torah that we study. I just heard an interesting story of, I think it happened in 1952. A Chabad Chassid, Rabbi Bukit, and the Rebbe's Chayzer, Rabbi Yoel Kahn, two rabbis went in the Catskills to a non-Chabad yeshiva for Shabbos. They were invited to come and speak. And so Rabbi Yoel Kahn, who was my teacher for a couple of years that I had him, he spoke Friday night, and then Rabbi Bukit, was a Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva, he spoke Shabbos day. So he made Kiddush on Mashke, on some Zeks and Neinsiker. Anybody know math? What's Zeks and Neinsiker?
6 of the ninth?
No, 96%. 96% alcohol, right? 4% water. No, you can't drink 100% alcohol.
Well, that was 100.
No, when it's 100 proof, it's 50%.
Yeah.
Right? If it's 80 proof, then it's 40%. That's what it is. Right? So not Zeks and Neinsiker is 192 proof, right? Which is half of any case. So he said, and anyways, before he spoke, the Rosh Yeshiva, no, Chabadnik, he gave a very deep Pilpul Talmudic teachings that we just went over everybody's heads and it wasn't relevant. So he, in his Fabringen, he was like, Torah comes from the word Torah. It's a lesson. It needs to be a lesson that's eternal. So you can't just teach something and it goes over the heads of people. And he was kind of giving it to the Rosh Yeshiva, right? That, So anyways, afterwards, after Shabbos, the Rosh Yeshiva called him in and said, you embarrassed me in front of the students. Well, he says, I'm sorry. I made Kiddush and I lost myself. I don't even remember that I said that. What the things that he repeated, I don't remember I said that. So I'm sorry. He says, I'm very disappointed in that. And I'm going to let your Rebbe know. Anyways, he came back to Crown Heights, and Rabbi Chodakov, the Rebbe's secretary, saw him and said that the Rebbe wants to see you. Says you have to go immediately and ask forgiveness from the Rosh Yeshiva. You have to ask forgiveness. You hurt him, embarrassed. He felt hurt. So, okay. And as he's leaving, he says, however, know that what you said was, you said good. You said good. Just, you got to go and apologize.
It was a 96% alcohol.
That made him say good.
Yeah.
So, you know, you could do good things. That doesn't mean you still maybe have to apologize. Right? Um, yeah, you still have to apologize. You know, a 12-year-old kid says to God, God, I need a bicycle. And then he realizes, God's not going to get him a bicycle. So he figures, okay, he goes to the neighbor. He steals the bicycle from his neighbor and says, okay, God, I got my bicycle, but I'm asking you for forgiveness. Yeah. The bicycle you're not going to give me, but at least forgiveness you could. Yeah. All right.
Listen, you can't get it one way, you can get it another way.
Well, okay. So let's begin with our story, this week's Parsha, where the Jewish people are in the desert. This is in the last year and a half. We now go from the first 2 years of being in the desert, 38 years of a hiatus, or 30 plus years. And now we come, and the Jews grow ungrateful. They're grumbling against God, against Moshe. It's not something new, right? And then the next thing we know, there's a vicious attack of snakes against Jewish people. And the Jewish people recognize, we did something wrong here. So they say, Moshe, please, we beg for forgiveness, right? Take care of it for us. So what has Moshe done till this time? What has he done? He takes care of the Jews. He prays for them, does whatever is necessary, right?
Yeah.
He did the last week's parsha with Dasan and Aviram, right? Trying to help them. And so he does here. But there's a little interesting twist to the story over here. It's a bit different. Let us. All right, look at that and look at that. Although, let's see if I change it, what's going to happen now?
Alt tab, Rabbi.
What are you seeing now?
We are seeing Torah studies, Chukas.
Hold on. Where did this go? Let's see if I graduate grade 2 now.
You're good, Rabbi. You're awesome.
All right, look at that.
Yes.
Wow. Graduate grade 2. That's pretty good. Let's see how many grades I can skip.
Where's the faces?
And the faces?
That's grade 3.
Now you're going to see the screen. Here are the faces. These are the faces. All right. So let's go. There we go. They journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. The people's souls became impatient because of the long journey. People spoke against God and Moshe, saying, why did you bring us up from Egypt to die in the wilderness? There's no bread or water, and our soul loathes this miserable bread, right? Because it tasted the same every day. Well, actually, no, the texture was the same every day. It tasted like what you wanted. God sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many people of Israel died. People came to Moshe and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against God and you. Pray to God that he remove the serpents from us. And Moshe prayed on behalf of the people. God said to Moshe, make yourself a fiery snake and place it on the pole, and anyone who is bitten will look at it and live. Moshe made a copper snake and placed it on a pole. came to pass that if the serpent had bitten a man, he would look up the copper snake and live. Oops. Okay. There we have, got the whole thing. All right, sounds pretty supernatural, right? A venomous snake. And what's the answer to the venomous snake? A copper snake. Right?
But what's that fiery snake?
Hmm?
Is it like a dragon? Fiery snake.
No, it means the venom.
Okay.
Right. It means the venom, right?
It's
So-
sign of medicine stick with snake.
What?
It's sign of medicine. Sign the serpent with the snake
Hold on
with
one
the
second. You
paw.
know what? 1 second. Let me just see that the fault. Okay, sorry, you were saying, David?
I said it was a sign today of medical. The serpent
Yes.
on the pole.
Yeah, the serpent. This is the sign of a medical practitioner, right? A snake around the pole. This is where it comes from, right? Yeah. Okay. So Rashi, who explains the literal understanding, gives us a pragmatic, insightful understanding here. She says, our sages thought, do snakes kill or heal? Rather, when Jews look to the heavens, thus submitting their hearts to the Heavenly Father, they would be healed. Otherwise, they disintegrated. Got it? So it wasn't a magic potion. The copper snake, right, was held up high. And if you would look up on high, meaning towards God, turn your heart there and recognize that you're dependent on God and you have to return to God. So then when you get bitten by the snake, this would be your healing, right? In other words, this is not just a mere snake attack, right? And it's not the snake attack that kills. It's the sin that causes the effect, and this is a divine punishment. Therefore, the divine antidote is tshuva, to return. It's interesting to note that snake in Hebrew is nachash,
Nachash.
and copper in Hebrew is nechoshet. Same letters.
Wow.
Right? Same letters. So when you take from the fiery venom of the snake that kills, but you make it into copper snake and you put it heavenward, so therefore you look towards heaven and you recognize that that snake down here is really a reflection of the snake up there. If you connect to the nechoshet, right, to the copper, in that you recognize that this is to bring you a resilience through tshuva, then it will be healing, right? In other words, God is the one who brings the healing, and He's the one who brings the destruction. Both. They're the same source. Nachash, nachoshes. They come from the same word, the same God, depending on how we live our life. Right? So Moshe hung a copper snake to draw eyes heaven upward toward the heavens, inspiring repentance. Moshe chose to hang a snake because it represents both God's instrument of punishment and his power to heal, as is in the very same word. Got it?
And why would the copper represent the power to heal? Copper.
Very good question.
You're asking, what's the significance of the use of copper?
Yeah, because of double meaning.
No, why is that specifically? It's a good question. It's not here in this teachings. But it's in a different teachings from that I have that I don't recall now from a while back. Okay? So if we look now a little more exacting on the words, it says, make yourself a snake. God instructed Moshe to fashion a snake rather than something else to magnify the miracles and wonders. He healed them with the very knife he used to strike them. He struck them with a snake and healed them with a snake. Okay? Is that clear? Now, what does a serpent represent? What does a serpent represent? Anybody know?
The serpent,
Sheker.
Adam and Eve.
Yes, right? Sheker.
Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve.
Well, it doesn't represent Adam and Eve, but it's in the story of Adam and Eve. That's correct. Correct.
Evil.
Evil. Excellent.
Temptation.
So, yes. So, what the serpent represents is selfhood, right?
Is what?
Exerting your selfhood, your individuality, your individuation, right? In other words, what happened in the Garden of Eden? What was the experience they had in the Garden of Eden before the sin of the tree of knowledge and good and evil? What was the experience? In one word. I gave it away. Oneness. I said one word. Oneness. Everything was connected to God. There was a oneness. There wasn't an individuality in the sense that I am me and you are you, right? Even their nakedness, they didn't recognize that they're naked. Because what do you mean you're naked? It's only because when you are separate from your source, so that you feel you are, oh, I'm this and you're that. I'm male, you're female. I'm different. And then all of a sudden, what happens? Your individuality begets desire, begets lust, begets so on and so forth, right? That's not what they experienced. They experienced a oneness with God. They saw their they saw their reproductive organs as only reproductive organs that were created by God for a purpose. So there's nothing embarrassing about it. The only time they got embarrassed about it and that they covered up their nakedness is after they felt their individuality, their selfhood, their self-awareness. I'm me and you're you. I'm different than you. Which means a sense of ego. And ego means edging God out. Right? Meaning now all of a sudden, instead of feeling oneness, you're feeling struggle. You're feeling from struggle, insecurity. From the insecurity, that's going to create competition. And from that competition, you're going to get jealousy, you're going to get suffering, and so on and so forth. Right? That's the story of Adam and Eve. The Nachash, the serpent, is the embodiment of everything that's not of the Garden of the Garden the Garden of Eden, right?
But the serpent was still in the garden.
Right, but he wasn't a part of them. They didn't have that, right? They were only sensed oneness. He was the only created thing that was not part of the oneness, right? And therefore, that's why, he wanted to create divisiveness, and that's what he did, because that's what he is. Huh?
Like an intruder.
Yeah.
It was like rejected from the garden.
Hmm?
Was he like rejected from the garden?
No, the Adam and Eve were rejected from the garden because they could no longer be part of God's oneness because they chose otherwise, right? Now they're aware. Aware means I am, right? Means I am what I am and you are what you are, and therefore there's not a oneness anymore, right? Is that clear?
Yes, Rabbi.
So then, this is the purpose of placing the copper snake on a pole was to raise the snake so Jews would look upward. To look down means to perceive the snake's influence as utterly differentiated from God with no hope of reconnecting. However, when a snake is raised, we realize that the snake is also part of God. It is not truly separated, thus neither are its victims, us. Amazing. Right? The snake down here is creating divisiveness, right? By sensing your separateness, your individual, my being self-aware, right? But when you put the snake up, right? What does that mean? You're putting it up. You're elevating it. You're elevating it, meaning you realize that the snake is also part of God and not truly separated. And not really separated. Is that clear? In other words, the snake is serving not to separate, but to create a oneness with God, right? How? When you resist its influence the way it is down here. And just look at it up the way it's up there. Because if you're going to look at the snake the way it's down here, so then you're going to disintegrate, right? You're going to be bit by its venomous, fiery, poison, and that will kill. But if you recognize that it's not, that it's really a part of God's oneness, right? Then it's part of God's plan. And that's what it says, that he struck them with a snake and healed them with a snake. What we learned earlier. Okay? All right. Now we got to clarify a detail over here. God said to Moshe, "Aseh lacha saraf." Make for yourself a fiery serpent, right? That's what he said. Make for yourself. What does it mean, make for yourself? Make yourself into fire for a serpent? Obviously not, right? What does it mean? That's it. Make yourself a serpent. Yourself means from your funds. As you pay for the copper, right? Don't collect it from the people. This is not a unique idea. Where do we have this previously? We had this previously by the first tablets that were thrown by Moshe when he came down and they were sitting with the golden calf. He threw down the tablets and broke them. What did God say? You hewn the second tablets. Lacha for you. So there are many different one of the explanations is that lacha means has to come from you. You have to find. I found the first set of tablets. You broke those. You find the second set of tablets. They have to be yours, right? Not from communal funds, but from you. Likewise, when it comes to the trumpets that we had a couple of weeks ago in the parsha, they also are an expenditure that came from Moshe. And now we have here. But the question here that is asked, why? Make for yourself a serpent. The word yourself means from your pocket. What is the reason for this instruction? It doesn't seem to add up. Right. Moshe is the leader of the people. Now, that he has to bring them to do tshuva, fine. So he has to make it, and he has to raise it, so people will look heavenwards to get their healing. But they're the ones who sinned. Shouldn't it come from their pocket? Shouldn't they pay for it? Right? It's for their sake to bring healing to them. Why should it come from his pocket? Okay, so to answer this question, we're going to delve first in the topic of forgiveness. So Moshe has a long history of forgiving the Jewish people. A long history. He's been doing it, right? For the last 40 years in the desert. But this week, including last week with Dasan and Aviram, right? As we learned in last week's Torah studies also, right? If you recall, the Yakam, Moshe got up, he arose. So we explained last week at the wedding, if you recall. I think most of you were just enamored with the wedding that you didn't pay attention to what I was teaching. Forgive me for saying that. So let's examine another comment from Rashi in the Parsha. Rashi says something very intriguing. In the verse it says, "V'yispal Moshe." Moshe prayed. And remember, they said, "We beg for forgiveness. We sinned." They said we sinned. We asked for forgiveness, right? Moshe immediately prays for them. Rashi says, "Mikan," from here, we infer that when asked to forgive, do not be cruel in forgiveness. You hear that? Yeah. Don't be cruel in forgiveness. So what's Rashi saying over here? Rashi is saying the fact that he prayed, Rashi wants to say, well, the Torah wants to tell us something, right? We know that he would take care of the Jewish people. He's done it till now in every instance. So what do you mean that he prayed over here? So here we learn something more. What do we learn more? That he prayed in a manner of giving forgiveness, right? This embodies the idea of being forgiving. So the Rebbe says it has a question, an issue with Rashi. When he uses the word mikan, which means from here, from this, that we learn the depth of what it means to be forgiving, right? In other words, recall, they did something against him, right? They complained against God and him, right? So from here we learn that to be forgiving in a manner that you should not be cruel in your forgiveness, right?
No resentment.
No resentment. Yeah.
Or you could say also to
Okay.
show
Fine.
mercy in the process of forgiveness.
Okay, good. But the Rebbe raises a question that when you say from here, that means specifically from here and not somewhere else, right? But Rashi expects us that we're going to remember everything that we studied before here, not just last week's class, at the wedding. Which that we remember.
Distracted.
He expects us not to be distracted, and we're going to remember everything. I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to myself, because I don't. Right? And if you remember your Chumash, and your Rashi, then you're going to remember from the book of Genesis, in Bereshis, that we have a similar story where there's forgiveness, where there's prayer, right? When is that? Then Avimelech abducts Sarah, the wife of Abraham. If you recall the story, for immoral purposes, he's the king of the Philistines, right? Avimelech has a dream and he's warned by God, don't touch her. He frees her, right? The entire house is stricken with a terrible condition. He returns and he asks, please pray for me, Abraham. I've sinned, right? Please pray for me and for my household. What does Abraham do? He prays, right? He prays to God on behalf of his family. He didn't hesitate, despite that Abimelech took his wife into captivity with not, holy intentions. So, a lengthy reading over here. Verse number 9 at the bottom, Avimelech summoned Avram and said, what have you done to us? What sin did have I committed against you? That you brought upon me in my kingdom a great sin, deeds that are not done, you have done to me. Abimelech said to Avram, what did you see that you did this? So he goes on and explains.
Dan,
I'll get those.
when?
I'm get this stuff cleaned up.
Dan,
I'm
let me
working.
Who's that?
Doesn't matter. There's silence. That's what matters.
Mhm.
Okay, actually, that whole thing wasn't necessary. Okay, but the next verse. And Avimelech said to Avram, verse 17. Avram prayed to God, and God healed Avimelech and his wife and his handmaids, and they gave birth. Okay, that's what's important over here. Okay. Gets showered with gifts afterwards. So the Talmud tells us over here, our sages tell us, how do we know it is cruel to withhold forgiveness if asked? It is stated, Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Avimelech. In other words, it would have been cruel for Abraham to hold back and not pray, even though he was harmed, right? Now, so the question is, why does Rashi say Mikan? From here we learn this. We learned it earlier already. You can't say that the place we learn for forgiveness is only in the instance of Moshe Rabbeinu in our Torah portion, because we have it an instance from Abraham. We learn from him, right? But Rashi doesn't say that. He doesn't say that we have two instances. He says from here we learn. So what we have to conclude is a question clear, first of all. Yes, everybody? Questions clear?
Yes, Rabbi.
Okay. Besides Hamid, who's always answering, which is good, but I want to make sure everybody else too. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Unless you're the designated yes man.
Mhm.
Rabbi, technical question.
Yes. Right.
Mikan, does Mikan mean from that or from that occurrence?
From here. Mikan means from here. Meaning
Mikan,
from
okay.
here, from these words.
Okay.
From these words, in other words. From here, this verse, from these words, we learn that you shouldn't be cruel in forgiveness. In other words, withhold forgiveness, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So what this tells us then is that there must be different levels of forgiveness. And what we're learning from here, we could only learn from here, and we couldn't learn from Avraham. That's the idea.
There's a novelty here.
Exactly. So, with that, we need the Rebbe's teachings from this week's Torah, from this week's Likutei Sichos. Let's dive into it. There are many degrees of forgiveness. Among them, it's going to give 3 levels: pardoning an individual's transgression to shield the offender from punishment. Right? The offender should get punished for what they did. So you forgive them in order that they shouldn't get punished. Clear? Number 2, exonerating the offender, not just to shield the offender, but because the partner bears no ill will. Something that was mentioned, right? That you don't bear ill will, you pardon the individual. So it's even more than just shielding, because in the first one where you shield them, might be you shield them, but you still bear a little kind of ill will towards the individual. I just don't want any harm to happen to you because of what you did, right? Third, in the highest level, is forgiving with a complete heart in a state of complete pacification. The forgiven party achieves the same level of friendship and love with the forgiver from before they committed the offense. Ooh.
Very intense.
Yeah, another way to define these 3 types of forgiveness: the first is forgiving the act of offense. Second is forgiving a person who offended. Number 3, erasing every trace of the offense as if it never occurred. Ooh. The Rebbe says the practical difference between these: in the first degree, the partner only exerts themselves to the extent that shields the offender from punishment from that specific offense, right? Someone did harm to you, and you're hurt, but I forgive you. No harm should fall upon you, right? But you're forgiving for that reason. Are you feeling a little angst? Yeah, but you're not going to let that control you, that you will be not forgiving, right? Is that clear? Second, and certainly the third level, in which the partner is with complete heart and the partner seeks the welfare of the forgiven party. The partner invests themselves. The partner makes every effort to rehabilitate the forgiven party until they become as righteous as they were before committing the offense. Whoa.
Above and beyond.
Yes. Let's understand. Let's now take apart and understand. Avraham, he was the embodiment of only the first degree, right? Moshe, on the other hand, was the embodiment of the third degree. Let's understand. Avraham prayed for Avimelech and his household. Why? Because they were stricken with a condition, and he asked, okay, I don't want you to suffer just because you did something wrong, right? Even though you brought pain to me, but I don't want you to suffer for that. So he prayed to take away the suffering that they were going through, to take away, alleviate the problem. But thereafter, did he have a relationship with Avimelech? No. He walked away. He left, right? They didn't really have a relationship afterwards. And not that it was incumbent upon him to have the relationship, but that's not the point. The point is, he doesn't have any more relationship with him, right? But Moshe is different. He doesn't just pray. He invests himself to making sure that the path to return is reached by everybody, right? So what does he do? He makes the copper snake. He hangs it up high that everybody should see it. And not only that, he invests in their sin by paying for it. By paying for it. This isn't only to shield them that they shouldn't have punishment, that they should look up. This is an investiture that he cared and wanted them to be reconciled with God Almighty. Much more profound idea. As the Rebbe
Like
says,
going the extra mile, Rabbi. Or
or 2-3 miles. Yeah, exactly. The Torah says about Abraham, text 6b, and Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech. Abraham's concern was limited to asking God to heal Abimelech and the others to spare Abimelech and his household from punishment. In our Torah's portion, it is stated that Moshe prayed to God on behalf of the nation, it says. He cared about the condition of the people, right? It wasn't he just prayed because of a condition they had. He cared about their condition, right? He cared about them, period. Not their condition, sorry. He cared about them, period. He cared about the condition of the people. His concern wasn't limited to stopping the punishment of serpents. He sought to heal their spiritual malaise. This is why the Torah relates God's response to Moshe. Make yourself a snake. When the Torah says yourself, the literal meaning is from your means. This is how Rashi explains the passage. Make yourself 2 silver trumpets. If the copper snake concerned the Jews who spoke against God and Moshe, it would seem more appropriate for them, the communal fund, to pay for it. By instructing Moshe to pay for it, God directed him to help them in a manner that showed how much he cared. Yourself, from your funds. This would prove that Moshe was in it for them, to heal their spiritual malaise. Wow. In other words, his care was such a care, his love was such a love, that their problems was his problems. That's not usually the case. When you're forgiving for someone, you have a problem, but I'm forgiving you, and I even don't hold it against you. But you got a problem. He didn't feel that way. He felt that their problem was his problem, right?
He's totally invested.
And therefore totally invested. And literally, it expresses itself that it has to come from him. This teaches us how to forgive. And that's what Rashi says. Mikan, from here we really learn what it means to be forgiving. Anything less than this would be, Rashi saying, cruelty. Wow. High level. Oh, sorry, didn't I read it and it was. So Torah is expecting us, according to the way the Rashi is explaining, that we should forgive others as Moshe forgave the Jewish people. Not the way Avram did to Avimelech. No. And this is how it is in halacha. Jews are forbidden to be cruel and refuse reconciliation. Instead, we should be easy to appease and difficult to anger. When an offender asks for forgiveness, we must forgive with a complete heart and a willing soul. Even if the offender harmed and offended us greatly, we must neither avenge nor resent. This is a proper disposition of Jewish people. By the way, I just want to make sure very clear, this is only between Jews. This is not to non-Jews. This is not to non-Jews, right? This is not an expectation to a non-Jew. Can you be this way? Pending what it is. After the Holocaust, there was a Nazi officer who realized who was sick, like it's on his deathbed, and he asked the nurse in the hospital, "Please find me a Jew." And found Simon Wiesenthal, right? Famous Nazi hunter. And he says, I'm very sorry. I asked for forgiveness for all the terrible things that I did to the Jewish people. Says, I'm sorry. I can't forgive you. You didn't do it against me. You have to ask all the, whatever amount of people that he was responsible for taking their lives. To me, right? I can't forgive on their behalf, right? So you can't forgive on someone else's behalf, right? They can only forgive themselves. But this idea, first of all, I question if that person was really asking for forgiveness, or he just felt that, his days are numbered and he's going to go to the heavenly court. And he was worried about what's going to happen to him in heaven. That's one thing. So was he really asking for forgiveness? That's one question. Has to be sincere request. But this law that right? In other words, is this particular that,
Is there any comments regarding, let's say, feels like forgiveness to be.
oh, just sorry, 1 second. No, I just want to finish this thought. Yeah. Sorry. So, sorry. So I just want to finish this thought because in the middle of the thought, I don't want to lose my train of thought. Sorry. This is an obligation, what the Rebbe is saying, between fellow Jews. It's not an obligation to someone who is not Jewish, right? It's not an obligation between fellow Jews. This would be an obligation, and that has to do because of the unity that there is between Jewish souls. Therefore, we are more connected than we are disconnected, if you will, right? Because of the virtue of this, of the nature of the soul, we are more connected. Which this actually offers an explanation of how is it possible that you can come to such a level of being forgiving, right? That you invest yourself in even the other person doing tshuva. Now, the other person, they need to do tshuva, right? In order to be cleansed. But how is it that you can get there? Is because, as we mentioned before about ego, right? Ego fuels the resentment by clinging to control and separateness. But true forgiveness comes from humility and surrender to the oneness with God. Right? So if you are aligned and feeling oneness with God, and not only that, not just that aligned, then you'll feel aligned with that fellow Jew who did harm to you, right? You'll be able to be aligned with that individual because on the level of the soul, you're connected. Where are you divided? Body. What is in the body is where your ego will make that sense of separation coming from the animal soul that's going to fuel that separateness. And therefore,
The feelings are in the body also.
in the animal soul, I mean, the negative feelings. There's godly feelings in the godly soul, right? So if you surrender to and live more with your godly soul, the more you live with it, the more that you're aligned with the oneness of God, the more you're aligned with all other Jewish souls. And therefore, it'll be easier for you to be forgiving in this manner. The more you're aligned with your body that distinguishes you from another, which is animated by an animal soul that's ego is self-directed, that I'm seeking my own self-benefit, right? So like the Nazi who was seeking forgiveness for his own self-benefit, right? Not because he felt that he did something wrong necessarily. I question that. But possibly, I don't want to take that away from that particular person. I mean, I question, right? As we know, many of them didn't. So when you feel that alignment, then you'll be able to be forgiving. So again, for a Jew, this is something that's expected because from that point of view, there is that connection with that fellow Jew. For non-Jew, I'm not clear on that, be quite frank. Like, I don't think you'd be obligated. And maybe even for a fellow Jew, sometimes you're not obligated either. But to give them forgiveness. Because by sometimes giving a person forgiveness, it just allows them to continue the way they acted. If it will allow them by giving forgiveness that they will just fall into the same trap. So even to a fellow Jew, you shouldn't be forgiving. But why are you not forgiving? Not because you are not able to, because you're holding on to it and you feel the resentment, but because being forgiving will just allow this person to continue in the same manner that they had been previously. In other words, they're really only seeking to feel good about themselves and not really owning their stuff. So they're not really owning what they did, the sin that they did, right? So it's interesting. What it says in the verse about the Jewish people, what did they first say? We have sinned. As they acknowledged, they owned what they did.
I'm sorry. How do you determine which person will benefit from the forgiveness and which person will continue to do what he does?
That's an excellent question. I'm not certain I have the answer at this moment, and I actually I don't want to digress on that right now.
Okay.
But excellent question. Yeah, excellent question. We probably should err on the side of being forgiving. But I guess if there's a history, simply put, if there's been a history and it's been many times, and I guess seeing the insincerity that in other words, sometimes, and we have to be honest with ourselves. Sometimes we ask forgiveness is because it's painful and we don't want to feel bad. It's not because we don't want to be bad. It's we want to feel bad. So therefore, we're asking for forgiveness. So we should come to recognize that we did bad. And because of that, I'm asking for forgiveness. And that's sincere. Right?
Thank you.
So I think that might be a way of allowing us to know. Right. So I think if the non-Jew would be true, then that would be a different story. Now, we will be going on Thursday. We're going to be starting the third part of Tanya, the third book of Tanya, Igeres HaTshuva, the epistle of repentance. And there we're going to explain later on that when we learn from God what it means forgiveness, we say in our daily prayers, if you look in the Siddur, in the Amidah, if you have a Siddur and you want to look at the Amidah, so the sixth blessing, you have a Siddur there? If you want, go to page 2321. 2321. It's only in Hebrew though. So we say, Slach lanu Avinu, forgive us, our Father in heaven. Ki chatanu, because we have sinned. V'chal lanu malkeinu. Be forgiving. Pardon us, our King. Ki bashanu, because we've done a intentional sin. Ki kielsta, because you are a good God, v'salah chata, and you are forgiving. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, God, Chanun, gracious, Hamar b'lisleah, that you are abundant in forgiving. What does it mean, abundance in forgiving? So the Alter Rebbe says, means how many times have we say to God, I'm sorry, God, I wasted my day today. Sorry, God, I again said, inadvertently something that was not appropriate to da 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 da, right? And we ask God, the other person, whatever, if it's only between you and God. So how many times? Over and over. God is abundantly forgiving. If we mean it, then God is forgiving. The Alter Rebbe takes it to a different level. He says, what does it mean he's abundantly forgiving? So a human being will be forgiving the first time, second time, not as easy if it's the same sin, third time, fourth, pushing it, right? God is abundantly forgiving means the 1,000th time that we said, God, I didn't use out this day the way you gave it and meant it to be. I ask for forgiveness. He's forgiving the 1,000th time that you've asked that as if it was the first time. As if it's the first time. Now that's God's quality. That's going to be a hard one for us, right? However, what's important is to note is that in being able to forgive is to unload a huge burden upon us. To be not forgiving, we carry a heavy weight. It weighs us down. We're feeling bad, which brings us to resentment. It brings us to try to control a situation and control a person in order to get the result that you want.
It's a two-edged sword.
Huh?
It's a two-edged sword.
It's a two-edged.
Resentment.
Yeah,
In other words, you hurt them, but you hurt yourself.
exactly. And right. Instead, you should be immediately forgiving. Forgiveness goes even a step further than what because here the people ask for forgiveness because they owned it, right? Forgiveness can even go a step further. When we go to sleep every night, again in the siddur, I'm looking at the chitas, that's why the page number. We have a regular siddur here. Oh yeah, thank you. So I'll give out the right page. There, it's going to be by Kriya Shema, by the nightly, before we go to sleep at night, we say the blessings of the Shema. So we have over there something very interesting. I've pointed it out before. It's on page 141. Before retiring at night, we say, Ribbon Shalom, Master of the universe, I hereby forgive anyone who has angered or vexed me or sinned against me, either physically or financially, against my honor or anything else that is mine, whether accidentally or intentionally, inadvertently or deliberately, by speech or by deed, right? In other words, we're forgiving even though they didn't ask for forgiving. So this it shows, this isn't, but Moshe did was even more because he invested his total self to help them come close to God, right? Which is amazing. Which is, by the way, when you're raising children make mistakes. Having the discussion, as a matter of fact, just last night. So, when you tell your child in the moment the wrong that they did, it's probably reactionary. It's probably more about you than it's about them. But if you wait for the right moment afterwards and you bring it up and have a discussion with them and you help them to recognize what they did and help them to own it, not by being judgmental on them, but bringing the awareness to them, right? Then that's investiture, right? Why are you doing that? Because you're not coming from a place of hurt. You're not coming because you said this. I'm forgiving anybody anger or vex me, even though they didn't ask. I'm doing this initially on my own, without them even asking. Now, of course, it's for their sake they need to ask, so they can properly heal and be aligned with the divine, right? So they need to do that. But that doesn't take away from me, who's been hurt and pain, that I can on my own be forgiving to them. Right? That's really important. Because, first of all, that takes away the burden of holding on to something that is weighing us down, hurting us, not allowing to see that person in a good light. and not letting go. That's a sense of ego, as opposed to bittul, which is self-effacement, that I'm able to let go and not be imprisoned by the resentment that I have towards that person. This is the healthy and appropriate way for an individual to be. So what we do every night by saying that, by letting go, it's amazing. As a matter of fact, by the way, just it continues over here. It says, in this incarnation or in any other incarnation. So Chassidim ask a question like, why are we saying this at night, that we let go? If someone vexed you in the morning and you weren't forgiving already, you had to wait till 12 hours later, 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, you're saying this, and someone hurt your feelings in the morning and you're holding on to it till then, that's not a chassid. Right? So why should we have to say this? So you might say, okay, maybe I'm not a chassid, but what if you are a chassid? How could you be saying this? That's why it says this incarnation or another incarnation. Meaning you, in another incarnation, maybe you weren't a chassid, and therefore you held on to it. You held on to the pain that someone put upon you, that you accepted. You held on to it. And because you held on to it, you had to wait till nighttime. That's not a chassid. And in previous incarnation, you were a masagid. Now you did tshuva.
Chassid does immediately?
Something that's very.
Absolutely. Right. A chassid, not someone who dresses as a chassid. Someone who acts like a chassid. Can dress like one doesn't mean you're acting like one, right? Yes, a chassid will be forgiving immediately.
What about if you forgive the other person, but like the other person doesn't know and doesn't care about what he did?
So that's an excellent question. So if you bringing it up to them, they will just deny it, or they will just say, you're being childish, or you're just being da. So don't bring it up to them because you're not going to help them, right? But if you can help them by bringing it up, that they will recognize, and therefore they will heal themselves. Remember, for them to do such a thing, they're not aligned with Hashem, right? So if you bring it up to them and they will recognize it, oh, that was really not nice what I said, I'm sorry, right? So then you should bring it up because that's your investment. You're investing in their healing, right? That's what Moshe Rabbeinu did. He invested in their healing. In other words, he didn't say, well, it's your problem. So here's the amazing, it's such a paradox when you think about it. Think about the paradox here for a moment, folks. Are you getting the paradox? Who can explain to me the paradox? What's the paradox over here? Anybody? Trisha. Chava, come on.
But like, the point of you forgiving is to also relieve yourself from the pain that the other.
But that's not a paradox. That makes sense. Paradox means two opposites over here. The two opposites is that I'm completely forgiving. It's completely out of my system, if you will. I have no angst. I have no pain. I'm not feeling, any sense of suffering here. And yet I'm taking total responsibility for your fault, that I have to help you through it, to get through it. Again, total responsibility will be if they're ready to own it. If they're not ready to own it, so you can't help them. But by Moshe Rabbeinu, they said, we've sinned. So they recognized, they were ready to take responsibility. So now he's teaching them. What's he teaching them? That it's not the serpents that are killing you. It's your sin that's killing you. The sin brings about the negativity. How does sin bring about negativity? Because sin is the opposite of godliness. Sin is the opposite of sin creates klipa, a negative force. A negative force brings destruction. brings destruction. Right? Destruction plays itself out in many different ways. Destruction can be that you feel just discombobulated, you feel disconnected. Could be that you emotionally, your mind tells you one thing, your heart tells you nothing, and you feel, right? It could be health. It could be other things, right? Other things it's going to be, right? Emotionally, psychologically, and many different ways that it can express itself. That you are disconnected, disintegrated, right? That it'll bring disintegration. So here you got sinned against, and you say, well, that's your problem, get a life and, get your act together, and, you shouldn't act that way. Moshe didn't do that. Avram kind of did that. I mean, not maybe not the way I expressed it, but, Avram, right? What did he do? Moshe. He invested himself. He invested his money in it. He invested his talents in it, right? To take the nachash and put it up high, and so on and so forth. To come and recognize that God is the one who brings through sin disintegration, and God through tshuva brings healing. He took responsibility for their sin. Not that for doing them, but to help them in the healing of their sin. Total responsibility. What a paradox. What an amazing thing. Unbelievable. That's being Jewish. That's a chassid. Actually, that's being a chassid. So to tie this in with the Gimel Tammuz, what does that mean to us? So another way to put this is, another way to express this is maybe another beautiful way. Listen to this. Tell me what you think. It's as follows. Listen. We live in a world today, there's a lot of Jews that are distant from Judaism. They're teenage nishba. They're like being captured by the nations of the world in the sense that, they're being raised today, children are being raised by, this, meaning the outside influence is great and the Jewish influence is not so great. It's weak.
That's the struggle.
Yeah.
That's the struggle.
So many people, they say, well, you got a problem out there? That's your problem. I'm going to create walls to separate me from those who are going to be a bad influence and bring bad things into my world. So I'm going to live in my ghetto, right? At least to save me and my family and my community. And many religious Jews have that sentiment. I got to save myself, which there's some truth to that. But here we're saying the opposite. Here we're saying we're taking responsibility for that person's sin, that they sinned against me. Now, if they didn't sin against me, I'm still responsible. Doesn't take away the responsibility of their lack, their so-called sin, their lack, right? I still have responsibility. If I have responsibility when they sin against me, and I still have to help them to do tshuva, if they did sin against me, all the more so I have a responsibility to help them do tshuva. All the more so I have that responsibility. Amazing. Who senses that responsibility? It's one person, the Rebbe. So after Mitzvah Shabbos traveled overnight to New York, to the oil, and heard from Rabbi Leibel Groner, the Rebbe's secretary, Alba Shalom. He told this story. I always heard this. I knew the story previous, but I didn't know as many details. It was goes back probably, I don't know if it was in the 60s, 70s, probably in the 70s. Yeah, I don't think it was in the 60s. I don't think so. Probably the 70s. But I'm not certain exactly when. I don't know if he said, to actually come to think of it. A shliach in Europe, he didn't mention the name of the shliach, gets a call from Rabbi Chodakov, the head, was it from Rabbi? Yeah, I think it was Rabbi Chodakov. Rabbi Chodakov says to him, we want you, but when he called and he said something, it wasn't him talking. It was the Rebbe talking through him. All right. But I don't think the Rebbe, he didn't say the Rebbe that wants you to, he says, as merviln, as we want, and he spoke in the plural, right? That you should drop everything and go to this town, which is about 4 or 5 hours away from where he lived, and go find a Jew there. That's it. So he says, Chodakov, it's a few days before Pesach. I'm going to have 400 people by my Seder. Have Rachmanis, have pity on. I can't. How am I going to do this? Azay villain, Mir. This is what we want. Immediately drop everything. Okay? He knows where the command's coming from. He drops everything. Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's frozen here. Okay. He drops everything. He travels to this town, looking for a Yid. Can't find. He's like, a few hours, he's like ready to give up. Goes into a gas station and he asks there, is there any Jews? Like, he says, in this town, no, but half an hour from here, there is. A butcher. There's a butcher in this town, I think it was like a town over or something like that. There's a butcher there. Go there. All right, he travels. He gets there 5:45, right before evening. He walks in. The butcher sees him. He faints.
Butcher faints?
He faints. Faints.
Faints.
He faints.
The butcher.
The butcher.
Oh.
He faints. He faints. He quickly comes and helps him. Well, he says, oh my gosh, how'd you get here? Who sent you? So I'm coming here from Lubavitcher Rebbe. Oh my gosh. So he tells him, my wife was Jewish, and I have 2 kids, teenage girls, 16 and 17, I think, or something like that, living in this town. And for years, the Galach, the minister, has been trying to convert us. For years, and we've pushed them off. No, we're Jewish, we're part of the Jewish people, and so on and so forth. And a week ago, he says, what's with you? Obviously, no one cares. No one knows that you're here. No one's thinking about you. No Jew ever is concerned about you. Obviously, you're not meant to be Jewish. That was stuck him a dagger in the heart. He didn't know how to respond. He says, come back in a week. Today's the 7th day, and he's here to come at 6 o'clock, and you came 5:45. That held him. That held him. So he verbracht with him, so, whatever. Kept. Anyways, fast forward a few years later, he's in Israel, this shliach, And I think it was at the Kaisel, the Western Wall, someone taps him on the shoulder. Rabbi, Shalom Aleichem. Looks at him. You don't recognize me? From several years ago. I went back, spoke to my wife, and my wife said, no, we can't live here anymore. We have to live a Jewish life. We moved to Israel. We became Bali Tshuva, our family, and all thanks to you. What does that mean? Could say sinners. You move away from living amongst Jews? That's pretty, that's pretty not Jewish. you know, that's really not wanting to, live a Jewish life, that you don't live amongst Jews or near Jews or whatever, right? And you say, well, listen, that's your lot. That's what you want. Any day you want to be interested and you want to do tshuva, okay, we'll welcome you. No, the Rebbe takes full responsibility for their tshuva. He takes full responsibility for their tshuva. So much so that he tells the shliach, drop everything. Drop everything. And our minds drop everything. What do you mean? We weigh, we balance things, and 400 people coming for Pesach. Okay, so what's going to happen? So they might not do some of the mitzvahs 100% because you went, maybe in the end, everything worked out for Pesach. That I don't know. But here's one, it's not one person, it was 4 people, a family. It's not just a family. It's the future families that come out of that family, right? The future families that come out of that. And why? Taking full responsibility for someone else to come closer to God. So, that is what we, to tie it in with Gimel Tammuz and what it means over here, that we care for another in their faults. Now, in this week's parsha, what it brings out especially is that when they did something against me, did against Moshe Rabbeinu. But Moshe Rabbeinu, now all he saw he was dutiful and what was necessary for him to engage in, as that to help them to come closer. Wow. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
He invested in himself also.
Yeah. So that Gimel Tammuz means that we have to invest ourselves totally. Then another Jew. And for the Rebbe invested, what the Rebbe did? He invested in us. He invested in the next generation in particular, the young. Like, for us to go up to a Jew on the street and ask someone, are you Jewish? Some people will take offense to that. That's a private issue. And anyways, I know what you want to do, what you want from me. Yeah. So, leave me alone. We're not going to leave you alone. We're not going to leave you alone. We're invested in every Jew to bring them closer to Judaism. Why? Because the oneness of God means the oneness of the Jewish people. And therefore, we are totally invested, totally given over. And another, I wrote into the Rebbe. I hope everybody wrote a pan yesterday to the Rebbe. And if you didn't, then do it today. And in the pan, tell the Rebbe what you're going to add to do something more. That you're taking responsibility, not just for yourself, but for the Jewish people. I just realized today I did half of what I said. Half of what I said I will do on a weekly basis.
That's why I'm going to Thailand, because I have a couple of Yiddish friends there.
So you have to full investiture.
Bring them back.
Got to bring them back. we have to take total responsibility, complete investment. Yeah, that's what Gimel Tammuz, that's what the Parsha teaches us. And that's, a Lubavitcher child gets that in their veins. My kids, when they were little, they would go, when they were 10 years old, they would go on Fridays on St. Catherine Street, which is like, not exactly a wholesome place. Downtown Montreal, any downtown city, right? Not a wholesome place. Fifth Avenue is not a wholesome place. But 10 years old, they're there with older boys that are 17, 18 years old boys, and they're going into stores and finding Jews to put on film with them. So they were raised that another Jew, another mitzvah, right? The Jews connected. Now all we have to do is help them to reveal their connection. All right, folks. Amazing.
Shkoyach, Rabbi.
Baruch Tiyah. Any questions here? All right, amazing.
Very uplifting class.
Huh?
Very uplifting class.
Baruch Hashem. We have a very uplifting Rebbe. All right, a good after, good vach, everybody. Thank you.
Good
Thank you,
night, good
Rabbi.
Vach.
Good
Thank
night.
you, Rabbi. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
Gino.
Thank you, Rabbi.